Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jan. I'm 47 years old. I live in Benicia, California, with my husband David and our three sons, Albert, Thomas, and James. And I'd like to wish you all a very happy Pride. In the United States and many parts of the world, June is also recognized as LGBT Pride Month, or Pride Month for short. Many will be reminded of it by the increased display of rainbow flags and similarly colored paraphernalia. In typical years, some would make plans for participating in one of the many marches, concerts, and other gatherings. I was recently reading, though, an article on the straight pride movement. The proponents basically make the argument that if LGBT people can have gay pride, it's only normal for heterosexuals to celebrate their orientation as well. While this movement is fairly minor and mostly seen as a media stunt, it also reflected a complete misunderstanding of what really is celebrated this month. As a pandemic that is afflicting the world has also dampened most physical reunions around Pride this year, this is an opportunity to reflect on the many meanings of this term. The pride that is referred to during the month of June is that of the LGBT community. For centuries, homosexuality was perceived in most societies as a perversion, and its punishment was codified by law. For obvious reasons, the social movement to change that was at first clandestine. But on June 28, 1969, customers of a gay bar in New York City, the Stonewall Inn, decided to riot in protest to a police raid targeting its patrons. The riots lasted several days, and even though they were not the first acts of rebellion against police brutality, they are now considered the watershed moment for the LGBT movement. In the years after, this movement continued to fight for equal rights. In 1969, it was legal for employers to fire someone on suspicions of their sexuality. It was legal to deny them housing. It was legal to deny them adoption or any other means to create their families. It was legal to submit children to reparative therapies that led to permanent or sometimes irreversible damage. It was legal to incarcerate them, sometimes after the proverbial roughening up. It was legal to deny to same-sex partners the rights and protections that marriage granted their heterosexual peers. The LGBT movement fought to reverse those laws, and over the years, that struggle has borne its fruits. Pride Month celebrates those achievements and is a reminder that those rights were not freely given, but had to be fought for. Pride Month is also a memorial for the fight against AIDS, a disease that, since emerged in 1981, affected disproportionately the LGBT community. Known early on as the gay cancer, AIDS resulted from HIV infection and spread rapidly throughout the gay community. The death toll of AIDS during the 80s and 90s is hard to fathom today, but it devastated communities throughout the world. The stigma of the disease added to the already existing one, and the LGBT community was largely left to fend off for itself during many years. But the tragedy also led to an even greater strengthening of the community. Lesbians, who were much less affected by the epidemic, became nurses for their dying friends. Meals were distributed to the homes of those too weak to even cook. Fundraisers were set up to help those who lost their jobs and could not sustain themselves. And those disowned by their biological families were then cared for by the circle of friends, that same logical family that would often be the only one to accompany them to their final resting place. The remembrance of those years and those who died is another reason for Pride Month. The recollection of the fight that activists and allies had to put up to get help from a reluctant government and a president who would not even mention the disease are also part of the celebration. I came of age as a gay man at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Before that, I had been exposed to the same things a lot of boys my age had to endure. The taunting at school, the reminders of what toys belong to what gender, the bullying for being perceived as feminine or for just not adhering to the same concept of masculinity shared by my tormentors, the fistfights, the pressure to find yourself a girlfriend, the constant guilt, the fear, the shame, and that nagging doubt of whether a life like this was really worth living. Pride Month is for me a reminder of the obstacles I had to overcome to get to this point. It's an occasion to be grateful for the work of all the men and women who made it possible for me to enjoy my rights, to reflect on the fact that had I been born at a different time or in a different place, I would not have been able to marry my husband nor adopt my 3 children. To dream of a time also when these rights won't be challenged anymore. To be clear, I'm not proud of being gay. I am proud of being alive. And that is ultimately why the celebration of straight pride makes little sense. LGBT pride is not a celebration of sexual orientation or sexual identity. It's a celebration of the work it has taken to get to live freely as oneself. It's the remembrance of the price that our community has paid to exist. It's a party to rejoice with everyone who has made this possible. Lesbians, gays, trans, queers, and straight allies. No one is excluded from celebrating Pride Month. So grab yourself a rainbow flag and join the party. Happy Pride.